Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing the 12.10 ADC tier list. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream. Starts every night around 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Usually goes until about 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. And check out the rest of the content as well. I just did a support tier list for 12.10 yesterday. And I'm going to be doing more tier lists for each role over the next few days. So be able to check all that out if you want to see sort of my predictions on where the 12.10 meta is going to shake out. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. Let me just really quickly, I'm not going to go through the entire patch notes for this, but I just want to hit the highlights that I think will affect ADCs the most and how I think it's going to affect them. I don't think the ADC meta has evolved as quickly as I thought it would, but we'll see what happens over the next few days. So everybody's getting 70 extra health and then 14 extra health per level. That's 84 extra health by level 6 just from the per level plus the 70. So you're getting 154 extra health at level 6, which is very important because that's the break point where a lot of lanes are going to go for all-ins with your Nautilus, your Leona, and stuff like that. You know, they'll try before then, but that's like a real danger point is when someone hits 6. So having all that extra health is a very big deal. It means that you're not going to get bursted out most of the time, and you're not going to get pressured out of lane as quickly. So this is going to favor, I believe, scaling ADCs moving forward. Now, a lot of people have not gotten on that bandwagon yet. You still have a lot of people going for your Lucians, your Misfortunes, and things like that. And those are okay. But I think the real winners here, as we'll see in the tier list, are going to be the hyperscalers, the Kog'maw, Vayne, Jinx, that type of thing. So we'll go into that a little bit more later, but that's the main thing you need to know is that hyperscalers are not going to be punished as much in the early game, and it's going to be really hard to all-in them. A lot of assassins are falling off in other lanes. I can show you that here in a second as well, but you're seeing control mages starting to take over in other lanes. You're seeing Talia. You're seeing Anivia being really strong in the mid lane, and you're seeing a lot less Zeds and Talons taking over, who are both in the red currently. I think Talon might be at 50%. But the Assassins are going down, the Control Mages are going up, which again means you want hyperscaling and you want range, so you can maybe position and stay away from, you know, their short range controlled areas. So I think that's going to disincentivize, you know, champions like Lucian, maybe Vayne to some extent, we'll see. I still think Vayne will be pretty good. But you're seeing the rise of bruisers and mages pretty much in other roles, and the diminishment of assassins, which means they're going to have less access to your backline, which means you're going to get to stand there and fire a lot safer than you have been able to do in the past. I don't think they're nerfing that many individual ADCs. They nerfed Kaisa's shield a decent amount, but it's not really that big of a deal. And as far as individual nerfs, I don't think so. Now, another thing that's also going to shape ADCs, and we're seeing this some in the support role, but not a ton. If you watch my support tier list video, a lot of people are still kind of a little slow to this. But I think enchanters are going to start taking over a lot more. Again, just because they can't be punished as much in the early game. And so they're going to get to scale as well. So you want to play ADCs, I think, that can play off of enchanters really well. So things about enchanters, a lot of times the best ones are going to give you extra attack speed. Sometimes they'll give you extra AD, extra on-hit damage. So you want to be playing champions that get a lot of attack speed, that can attack quickly and scale with that. Those hyper-scaling champions typically. So I think Lulu is going to rise to prominence more. She's lagging behind a little bit right now, but she was my sort of pick for MVP. But then Sona I thought Sona would be really good. I had her S-Class, but she has nudged a little bit over Lulu, and you see Janna is performing exceptionally well also. Senna's kind of an outlier. She is incredibly powerful right now. I suspect she's probably going to get hot nerfed. Some of the enchanters might get hot nerfed as well. But just champs that can play around this really well. Again, the long range, fast attacking champions I think are going to be meta. You're seeing a lot of the hard engaged champions fall off quite badly right? If we look at Leona, down at 46%. You look at Nautilus, down at 48%. So that means people are not going to be threatening you if you're playing Kog'Maw or Twitch or Jinx. They're not going to have that all in. You're going to get a free pass in the laning phase versus Janna or versus Lulu or whatever, and it's just going to be a farm off. Whether you like it or not, most of the time for 10, 15 minutes in a game, it's probably going to be a farm off. So you want to play champions that work really well in that environment. Now the supports have by and large figured that out. Not to toot our own horn or whatever, but we've rotated into that. That's what a lot of people are playing. I mean, I guess you're still seeing some people playing some of the champs that have the low win rates, but more and more people are sort of gravitating slowly towards the enchanters, although not as fast as they should, frankly. But the ADCs have not. Right, so you still see like Vayne is the highest one at the 5th picked champion. Jinx is kind of there, but a lot of people really are sleeping on Kog'Maw. They're sleeping on Twitch. So this is an opportunity to get an advantage, especially if you have a duo. This is a really good meta for a duo. If you have an enchanter you can trust that can buff you up as an ADC. Okay, so let's go and get into the picks. I didn't want to spend too long on that, but I just wanted to hit sort of how I think the meta is shifting overall. There are a couple of items. The most notable one, sorry, one last thing, then we'll get in there. The most notable item that's getting changed that would affect ADCs is going to be Immortal Shield Bow. I don't know why it's not in alphabetical order. But this item's going to get a lot worse. You lose 25 shield early, and then you lose up to 70 shield later, and you're losing the lifesteal. So crit champions that want to run Immortal Shield Bow are going to be knocked down just a little bit, like your Samiras. But most other champions are just going to go for something that's more aggressive a lot of the time. So, anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and get in here. So Kog'Maw is going to be my sleeper pick of the patch that I think is going to be incredibly powerful. And Kog'Maw has several things going for him. He has some unique build choices that I think synergize super well with what's going on in the meta. So the most obvious thing with Kog'Maw when you look at him is that he has the percentage damage. And I think they might nerf Kog'Maw. His win rate's not high enough yet, but they said they're going to pay attention to Kog'Maw and Vayne because they have the percentage health. Everyone's going to have more health. Therefore, those abilities are going to be stronger on them. But he gains a lot of attack range, so he does get range, as the game goes on. So pretty long range. And then he does that percentage damage up to 7%. Now, this is also magic damage, so you're doing physical damage and magic damage. So that mixed damage is actually quite helpful if your team has a lot of AD. Now, like, armor's still going to be pretty good, but the mixed damage is difficult for enemies to itemize into, especially because he doesn't want to get stuff like Last Whisper, so it's not going to affect his scaling too much. So very good, long range, massive damage, decent poke early on with the Q. This mostly just gives him that extra attack speed, so he does have an attack speed steroid built into his kit. It can shred tanks. If you are against a super tank, you already deal high percentage damage, but now you can also shred up to 33% of their armor and magic resist, which is obviously going to be really good. And that lowers it for the entire team, right? So it's not just you. If that Ornn is right there and you hit them with this Caustic Spittle, they're going to lose, 33% of their armor and magic resist for 4 seconds for the entire team. So it's almost like a Trundle. It's not quite a Trundle ult, but if you hit this, it's definitely going to make tanks a lot weaker. So, very, very good tank buster. And then the Void Ooze just gives you a little bit of an escape mechanism if you're just playing on-hit Cog, which you should. Please don't do AP Cog in this meta. But that just gives you a little bit of escape, doesn't do too much. And the R is okay. If you hit it, you can snipe people out. Finish some kills. If you're able to pressure and put them under tower, this can take them off the tower, maybe even get you a kill or two. So not really super relevant for a lot of this build, but it's handy every now and then. The main thing that about Kog'Maw is just his W and just how much damage that puts out. It doesn't look like a lot. It is a ton of damage with long range, mixed, very difficult to itemize against. Okay. Another couple of things about Kog. Obviously, lethal tempo is going to be extremely good with him because that, scales with the attack speed and gives him the extra range. But then once you start getting into the items, that's where it starts to get a little curious and sets him apart from some of the other champions. So, first of all, you have the ability to rush Gensus because your W is so incredibly powerful by itself that you don't really need AD or AP for him to scale. all you really need is attack speed and on-hit damage a lot of times. And so the Gensu gives you that, and it also gives you every third attack applies on-hit twice. That is your W. So that's going to be even more damage on people. And the really nice thing about this item is its price tag. It's only 2,600 gold. So you're going to be ahead of the curve on a lot of other ADCs out there because they're going to be building items typically that are in that 3,000 plus gold range. You're going to be able to get your item at 2,600. Pressure, get more plates, get dragons, just exert yourself in the lane a lot faster because you have an almost support priced item there as your first major item. And this item scales incredibly well with the other items you're going to get. So this is just like the perfect item for Kog'Maw at a really abusive price point. Frankly, it used to be a 3,000 gold item, and then they moved it to 2,600 and nerfed the stats, which is great for Kog'Maw. Then you have Runan's Hurricane. Now, this is another item that really exploits on-hit effects. Again, your W is an on-hit effect and can hit multiple targets. So whenever you're shooting out that spit at everybody, it can hit all 3 targets, and it's going to apply that extra damage to everybody. So this is going to give you a crazy amount of wave clear. It does work with Gensus. Each one of the bolts does not give you an extra attack in terms of Gensus, but Gensus gives you that single target blasting for every third attack being extra, and now Runan's is going to give you that extra spread damage on everybody. So it's wave clear, it's great team fight capabilities, and again, look at that price tag. What are we looking at here? 2,600. Super, super cheap itemization here for Kog'Maw. These first 2 items are big, and it is really hard to deal with him once he gets these items. And the third one, the weird one that's come in, which fits very, very well into this meta, is actually Titanic Hydra. Because Kog'Maw does so much damage off of his first and second items, then he can actually get something goofy like Titanic Hydra. Now, this is going to give you 500 health, which is obviously very, very good in the mid-game. It's going to prevent people from one-shotting you. And you gain extra attack damage equal to 2% of your bonus health. Because you're getting extra bonus health per level now, you're going to have a couple hundred extra health. That is going to convert over into a little bit of extra damage. Sorry, let me just mute this real quick. Okay. But read that cleave. Attacks apply an additional physical damage on hit, creating a shockwave that does extra splash damage. So the on-hit damage also applies to structures. And I believe your W magic damage, I think that also applies to structures. But what this means is with Gensus, you can trigger this twice. And even more importantly, with Hurricane, it actually splashes, and each Hurricane bolt is going to splash people with the Titanic Hydra damage. So it's just like an absolutely unmatched terror of team fight damage when you have Kog'Maw with Runan's, with Titanic Hydra. It's just absolutely nuts. So not only are you unkillable, but you're just going to completely annihilate everybody in a team fight. So it's just incredibly strong. You also have other options. You can get something like a Wit's End. If you are afraid they're going to dive you and they're mostly magic damage, you can get this item as well. It has been nerfed a little bit over time, but it's going to give you the extra movement speed, the extra survivability, the magic on-hit damage, which will apply with the bolts. But again, Titanic, most of the time, I don't know the exact math on every scenario, but I would say that 500 health is probably more useful than 40 magic resist in a lot of situations, even if they do have a heavy magic damage team. But Wit's End is on the table if you need that. And then fourth item, you can even go something goofy. You could do Wit's End fourth, and that's, going to be good. But I've even seen some Kog'Maws get stuff like Randuin's. If they happen to have like an AD assassin or something like that, you can even get a full-on defensive item if you have to. And that they're just not going to be able to kill you. And you have so much base damage, it doesn't matter. Like, you're still going to kill everybody. So that's just really kind of the beauty of Kog'Maw, is extremely high base damage and range, and that gives you a nice assortment of items, offensive and defensive, that you can get to really take over the game. And he pairs incredibly well with Lulu. That's one of the most OP combos in the game that I can think of for solo queue is Kog'Maw Lulu, because you're going to be giving Kog'Maw extra movement speed and attack speed with your W. You're giving him extra on-hit damage with your picks. If they ever try to dive you, you're going to be able to use your ult. boost them up, give them a ton of extra survivability. That extra infusion of health, that HP that you give them temporarily will also empower Titanic Hydra because that counts as bonus health while it's up. So it's just a little bit of extra damage there. But the entire kit of Lulu is just insane. You also have a shield that's good at protecting him. So that's just an incredibly OP combo. I would say if you ever see a Kog'Maw on your team and you have any inclination towards Lulu, definitely pick Lulu. It's virtually unstoppable. And then he's also pretty good with other enchanters as well. Janna can peel very well for him. And then Sona can, make sure that he's going to get that free laning phase. And it's going to give you lots of protection later on in the game. So, Kog'Maw, he's still vulnerable to flanks. He's still vulnerable to getting hooked by Blitzcrank and stuff like that. But with fewer and fewer of those champions being played right now, if everyone's just handshake farming off 10, 15 minutes and they're just going to let you get your first item, I think Kog'Maw is going to perform exceptionally well in that type of meta. So, anyways, Kog'Maw's my sleeper pick. A lot of people aren't talking about him. Has a really good win rate right now. Just makes a ton of sense. He was pretty good, I think, back in the day in the Ardent Censer meta as well. Next we have Vayne. So this Vayne's not so sleeper. I think this was everybody's prediction for sort of breakout ADC. At least a lot of people that I think critically about metas and try to make predictions. Most people were calling for Vayne to be strong. Vayne was already pretty good before this patch. The big problem was she just can get bullied out early by Lucian, Misfortune, some of these poke champions like the Zeraths, Brands, Zyra, stuff like that. But those champions are fading out of the meta. Very similar to Kog'Maw. She does have that percentage-based damage, up to 14% true damage, so definitely shreds tanks super well. And then you have lethal tempo. Again, pairs really well with her silver bolts. Now I'm curious, people are getting Shield Bow. I would want to see, why not Ginsu's, I guess Ginsu's first is bad, but yeah, it's kind of a lower win rate all around. I guess it's not quite as powerful as Kog'Maw's, especially because she doesn't have the range, so having a little bit more survivability maybe is a thing. But Kraken's still really good on her. Surprisingly, Shield Bow's pretty good too. I guess the thought process is if you don't get blown up, that's going to give you more time to reposition, use your E to displace people, and just kite around. Versus Kog'Maw is you just protect him, and he just wants as much damage as possible up front. But as you can see, scales incredibly well as the game goes on. I'm sure everyone's seen, 3 or 4 item Vayne. Super slippery, very difficult to get a hold of. Now, I will say she does not have very good range, so that is going to make her vulnerable potentially to things like Anivia or Talia. She does have the mobility to dodge the skill shots, but she does have to get a little bit closer. That's going to allow something like a Lulu to polymorph you potentially. As you get closer, it gets more dangerous. And she doesn't have a lot of AoE in team fights, so she's only going to be hitting single targets. So if a Kog'Maw or a Jinx, if you're having a 5v5 team fight and they're just sitting there hitting 3 targets at once with their hurricane nonsense and you're just hitting single targets, that could be a problem. So she does have weaknesses, but incredibly powerful duelist, very slippery, one of the best do-it-yourself if you can't rely on your support but you want to play a hyper carry. She's a good pick, and she does work well with enchanters, right? If you put a Lulu with her, it's fantastic. The movement speed's awesome with Vayne, allows her to reposition. It's going to give her that extra damage for the silver bolts. Now, I will say, as far as why you don't see Hurricane if you've never played Vayne, her W specifically is on attack, not on hit. So that means that the bolts do not apply it. Also, it can only apply to a single person at once. If you start attacking somebody else, it resets the bolt count. So you have to get 3 consecutive attacks on the same target in order to trigger the silver bolts. So it doesn't work as well with Hurricane. But she still has lots of other options. And sort of similar to Kog'Maw, she does have some pretty good defensive options as well, in the sense of she can go something like a Wit's End third item if she needs to, which can be strong. And she can even get, like a Randuin's 4th item. She doesn't have to do that. Again, it's very rare, but it is on the table if you want that. Or you can go for a more traditional Guardian Angel. So, has a few different builds that are all pretty good. A lot more mobile than Kog'Maw. Can sort of peel divers better than Kog'Maw, but is not going to do as much in a team fight in terms of stand and fire. And I would say if she is going to get hit, she doesn't have the option of getting the Titanic, I don't think. I mean, I guess you could try that on her, but the real power of the Titanic is the bolts, the Hurricane bolts applying it. I mean, that's what Zeri was doing before Zeri got nerfed a lot. Okay, so anyways, Vayne going to be really powerful. Now, Jinx is one that is probably the most surprising to me, that she has such a low win rate right now, and actually has a pretty high pick rate, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. I know they did nerf her health a while ago. She did have like 600 something, then they nerfed her back down to 500 something. Now she's been buffed back up to 600 something. So I'm not really sure. I see this champion being quite strong in a lot of scenarios, so I'm not, again, I don't really know why people are messing her up. You know, Kraken is going to be very strong on her. She doesn't have a lot of defensive options. I guess that is one thing to note about her, is that she really does want critical strike, and I guess it takes her more items to truly come online and start really blasting people. She does still do very well over time, as you can see from the chart. But yeah, it looks like you just want to go Kraken. Gale Force is kind of an option, but again, the burst doesn't matter as much. It's all about standing and firing, I think, in this meta. And so just getting Kraken is helpful. That is on attack as well, so that does not apply with your rockets. However, your rockets can crit, and when you do get Hurricane, if you get Hurricane, which it looks like a lot of people are going more towards the dueling Phantom Dancer right now, which is a very good bargain of an item. Hurricane, if you choose to get it, kind of like Kog'Maw though, each one of those bolts does apply a rocket which can splash and do extra damage. So you do have a few different options, but it is going to take her a little bit longer to come online, and she is going to be more vulnerable if they are stacking armor. And it is going to be harder to burst them out because she doesn't have that percentage damage like the Vayne, like the Kog'Maw. She doesn't have the mixed damage like Kog'Maw or the true damage like Vayne. So I still think she's pretty strong. You do get a lot of free kills, usually at least a couple a game off of that rocket, the R. Especially in lower elo brackets, people just completely forget about it. And, you know, someone will try to back in a bush or whatever, and you send a rocket over to them and get a free kill. So she does have that going for her. It is a pretty useful ultimate. And then she can chain together some CC. So if you get, you know, ganked, your jungler ganks for you, or you do have an engaged support, a Leona, a Nautilus, one of those holdouts, still playing engaged supports or whatever, then you can pair that together with the Chompers pretty well to CC someone for a long duration. Now, she does scale. She does get a lot of extra attack speed if she chooses to use the minigun, or she's going to get long range, you know, heavy AD splash damage with her rockets. So Jinx in particular, or not Jinx, Janna with Jinx in particular, I think is pretty strong. Let me get that blanket off the couch there. Is pretty strong because she gives that extra AD, and that AD works really well with champions that crit, and your rockets naturally give, I think, an extra 10% AD or something like that on them. So scales incredibly well with Janna, pretty good with Lulu also. So you have several pretty good options, and I think Jinx is underrated right now, and that she'll end up being a powerhouse. And then finally I have Jhin. Jhin doesn't really fit the mold of what I'm talking about here in terms of attack speed and like hyper scaling, but he has a lot of utility. There are a lot of different options you can do with Jhin. And he does have a pretty high win rate. Like, he has the second highest pick ban influence. He's rarely banned. So, Jin's still going to be an okay choice. Now, he does scale kind of in a different way. If people aren't playing turbo tanks, he does do pretty well against squishy champions. So he has nice wave clear early with the grenades. He can pressure some of these early game champions that are going to be a little bit squishier and immobile with Gale Force. One of the really big things is this W, for some reason, can root people for up to 2.25 seconds, especially in the mid game once he gets some points into it. It can be a really powerhouse ability. And then, of course, you have your ultimate, which can be good for finishing people off, or if you can't quite get to a fight, at least you can do something by throwing a couple of shots out there. You have the traps, which can be good for kind of managing ganks and controlling brush. So he does have a lot of pretty good utility. Now, he doesn't work as well with a lot of the enchanters because the attack speed does get converted over to AD, but it's not at a favorable rate, I don't think. But the extra movement speed off of some of these champions can be good. And obviously the flat AD off of like a Janna shield can be quite good with him, especially if he has a lot of crit. Because the AD scales incredibly well with crit on him. So, anyways, Jin's still going to be a good option if you want the pressure, if you want the scaling. But you just need to do a lot of damage up front because of your team comp or whatever. You don't think you're going to have time for a lot of attack speed, or you just like playing Jhin. I think that he can still be a pretty good pick. Okay, and then moving down to tier 2, Twitch. Now, Twitch can keep up with stuff like Jinx or Kog if he gets really fed, but I think his laning phase is just a little bit rougher than some of the other options on here. He can't, if people sit there in your poison, if you hit them with the W, the little poison pool, and then people choose to just sit in it, yeah, you can beat them in a duel early on. So if you hit them with that poison, if you're kind of playing around that cooldown, then you can back people off of cannons or other, you know, types of things. So it is pretty decent early on as sort of a trading tool. And then, you know, Twitch's main claim to fame, though, is his invisibility. So especially as you go down and down and kind of the elo brackets, that invisibility gets more and more powerful. So there's going to be fewer wards. People are not going to respect the invisibility. So he can really sneak up on people and snowball games very, very quickly. A key with Twitch, though, is really trying to read the situation and understanding when you should show yourself in a fight. I think a lot of people do it too early. So they'll just, and they do it at too close of a range. So they'll just try to open up like almost in melee combat with the enemy because they want to kill them even if the person flashes. But a lot of times I think it's better, especially in a team fight, to open up, you know, at 700 plus range, because you got to remember that he gets like 800 range, 850 I think, when he ults. So you should use that range, use the very long range. A lot of people, like I said, they just get way, way too close with Twitch because he's very immobile, right? If people get a hold of you, it's a bad thing. So you want to open up and just wait. Open up from like, you do want to open up behind your teammates too. Try not to do the flank ult. Sometimes people do that. There might be situations where a flank ult's okay, but usually stay behind your peelers, you know, stay next to your enchanter. He can be good. So one thing I will say that is kind of good and kind of bad is lethal tempo doesn't work particularly well with him, because typically when a fight goes on, he comes out of invisibility and he presses his ult button. You've really got 5 seconds for that fight. That's about as long as your ult's going to last, and I think your empowered attack speed is also something like 5 seconds. Yes, 5 seconds on that and 6 seconds on the ult. So that's all you got, really, for like your massive power spike in a fight. So by the time lethal tempo comes online, you know, the fight's going to be, you know, you're going to be out of your power window. So that's why a lot of people go for the press the attack instead, just because you're going to trigger it after you get 3 hits on somebody. It's going to make them vulnerable for that extra, you know, usually 10 to 12% damage. And then when you do your expunge with your E, then it's going to get that extra kick to it. So he's really more of a burst ADC in a lot of these fights. So that can be, you know, like I said, good or bad. Good for burst, bad for sustained damage in really long fights if you're against a ton of super tanks. You do have to be careful how you position because, again, you don't have mobility. But Kraken can help you out with tanks, does a lot of sustained damage. Obviously, Collector is going to be pretty good, particularly because after you expunge, your poison still stays on them and is ticking down. So if they tick down below that threshold on Collector, it's obviously going to kill them. So anything with a dot is usually pretty good with Collector, just to make sure you get those kills a lot of times. That helps you snowball, so your support doesn't accidentally take it, you know, with an ignite. And then Hurricane works really well with him, similar to Kog'Maw, where your poison gets applied to everybody in that huge range when you're firing with your ultimate. They changed Hurricane to where it matches the max range of the attack. It's not cut off at 600 or whatever it used to be, so it makes Hurricane even better on super long range champions like Twitch. So, you know, applying that Hurricane poison. Now, his graph is a little inconsistent, does kind of fall off late game, but he's not super popular, and a lot of people may just, like I said, just don't position with him correctly. So I still think that just going Kraken into Hurricane is probably the way to go, into Infinity Edge. is just going to give you your biggest bang for your buck. Now, there are still AP Twitch builds where you can go like Nashers into Death Cap, but as you can see, the win rate's not that great there, and I feel like you really, really want an AD threat right now with scaling, with crit, because that's going to synergize best with a lot of the other supports out there. Janna particularly is very good with crit, popular, powerful champion, and then I think that things like Lulu are going to be better. So, yeah, go with the AD unless you early pick Twitch and your entire team is AD and you really, really have to go AP. I've seen it work. It can work. It is a nice power spike on one item, but it just scales, I think, worse. And Death Cap's second item is pretty rough because you have to get 2 needlessly large rods, which are a pain in the butt for back timings, and you have to complete it. So just do yourself a favor and go for AD on Twitch as much as you can. Unless, again, your entire team is trolling you and picking AD when you early pick Twitch. If you need something that does AP, and you're a later pick and your whole team has AD, consider doing something like a Kog'maw instead, because he's going to have a lot more reliable magic damage if you want that. You could also pick a mage, but I think mages are pretty bad. You notice I didn't put any mages on here, and I guess I'll go ahead and mention that. You really, really want scaling AD champions in this meta. Like, you might be able to play something like Cassiopeia, could be okay, because she does that really high sustained damage. But I think playing some of these, popular burst mage things like Veigar, I guess Karthus isn't burst, it's Ziggs, that type of stuff. It's just not the early to mid game pressure meta that it once was. So, I mean, if you really want to play something that's kind of like does some AP early, maybe like Misfortune with her E, but I think you really just want to pick AD champions, and if you do have to have AP, just Kog'Maw. If they're gonna stack all armor, whatever, just Kog'Maw or Vayne. Both of those are still gonna kill tanks that are stacking armor, trust me. So I don't think you have to do anything too fancy. Don't overthink it. Just play S-class champions, or maybe A-class if you have experience or certain matchups. Okay, Tristana, still gonna be pretty good. I think Tristana would be my choice if you do want to try to go for a kill lane. So if you do have a Zyra, Blitzcrank, Nautilus, those types of champions, she can jump forward. Hail of Blades gives her a lot of power early on, lets her trigger those bombs very quickly, and then she's going to get Gale Force or Kraken, which is going to... I guess you probably want Kraken with Hail most of the time, so you can trigger it so quickly. But she can snowball incredibly fast, right? If you get a kill, it's so hard to get away from her because she gets double jump. She can jump on you at first if she's ahead, and then reset the bomb and then jump again. So incredibly obnoxious. If she does get ahead, she can zone you off the entire wave. As you can see, if she ends the game early, she does do very well. But she is serviceable later also. She does have an attack speed steroid with her Q, which is pretty good. She does get quite a bit of attack range eventually. It's slower than some of the other mainstream long-range champions. It's slower to scale, but it is pretty good later, and she does have a lot of peel mechanics. So she has her R that can knock people back. She has her W, which is not only a jump, but it's a buffer, which means that if you're in the motion of trying to jump up, it makes you immune to CC. So even if like Blitzcrank hits you right when you're in the motion of going down, getting ready to jump, you're going to be immune to it. So really good Trist players can exploit that mechanic a lot, and it's really obnoxious to deal with. I hate going against Trist players as, Rakan or Nautilus or any engaged champ, because they can always buffer out of your engage a lot of times. So pretty safe champion if you want the mobility, the long range, and you also want the kill threat early. Then she's a pretty good combination of those things. It does take, if she doesn't get those kills, it does take her a little bit longer to come online, and she isn't as strong in team fights because she doesn't have very much AoE. She's got her bomb, but that's not like that much in a team fight. She doesn't really do well with Hurricane, and she really comes online once she gets that Infinity Edge. So that's very expensive itemization. You got 3,400 on Kraken, you got 3,400 on Infinity Edge, compared to Kog'Maw. Again, his first two items are 2,600. So it's an uphill battle with Trist, but she's one of the better kind of traditional build ADCs that you can play out there. But I would probably only recommend her if you have a kill lane. If you have like a Janna on your team and you're just sitting there farming off against Vayne or Kog'Maw or Jinx, I think you're in a bad place. Like, you need to be able to try to force some action early. And then the other usual suspects for early action. We've got Miss Fortune, who is still like okay. She is primarily, I think, an early game bully champion with that Comet build. And that's going to be a lot less powerful when, you know, a lot of the meta supports right now are going to be enchanters instead of the brand Zyra, Xerath, that type of stuff. But you can apply some pressure to things like Vayne, Kog'Maw. Early on, you can get, you know, stuff like Eclipse and a Muramana. So if you just kind of want to kind of play a support mage, just suppress the bottom lane and just press R in a team fight and be useful later on in the game, she can do that for you. But I think her ability to sort of hyper carry and completely take over the game with an enchanter is a lot weaker than some of the other picks. So she had been very strong in the previous meta, but now as we continue to shift towards this hyper scale, I would not want to be matched up, you know, again against Kog'Maw or Jinx or whatever. Yes, you can kind of poke them out, but they're going to have a lot more health per level. And they can find some ways to deal with that, potentially. You know, I don't know what it would be. Maybe like buy an early Doran shield or something like that. Or especially if they have an enchanter, they can just shield every time you E. The enchanter just shields it. And they're going to block most of that damage. And their shield is going to be less mana than your E a lot of the time. So especially something like Sona, it'd just be really bad. Because she's just going to shield, because she's going to get a tier also, and she's going to have almost infinite mana with you, and she's just going to match every time you E, she's going to W, and you're just not going to get a lot done in the lane. So she's okay, but just not quite as powerful as she used to be. And then Lucian, I think Lucian can still take over if he does have Nami with him. That's still an incredibly powerful lane, but at the same time, again, he's an early game champion. He's short range. He does do a lot of burst, but they're probably going to sustain through it or shield through it if it's an enchanter, and I'm just not sure you're going to have enough power to, you know, force anything off of the ADCs without, like, jungle assistance. I mean, maybe, like, if you have Blitz, Blitz is someone who can still do enough damage to blow people up, potentially. But Lucian, I think, is going to fall off if you don't snowball as hard. Okay, then the last few champions, not going to go over all of these in depth because I do want to try to keep this under 45 minutes. Kaisa is still really popular but has a low win rate, and I'm not very high on Kaisa. I think a lot of people still like to go the AP build on her, and that's just not as good against enchanters, particularly ones that heal. So like your Sonas, your Sorakas, your Yumis, and if they can, even like Lulu, if she can put the shield up fast enough, it's going to mitigate a lot of your poke. And really, she needs like 3 items before she really starts popping off with that build. Now you can go crit Kaisa as well. Those rockets are okay in the early game. She does have, you know, some damage that she triggers every like 4th attack or 5th attack. I don't remember what it is. So she does like scale pretty well with the on-hit damage, but I just feel like Vayne is just going to put out a lot more damage. Now, their purposes are a little different, right? Like, Kaisa can dash to the back line and dive people on that back line pretty well. But I think Vayne is just going to crank just a lot faster with those silver bolts, just her ability to reposition much more often than Kaisa in most circumstances. I just think Vayne just synergizes a lot better with the supports, with the items, and with the way the meta is shaping up right now. So Kaisa's okay, but I just think she doesn't pressure enough in the early game to make up for the fact that I think in a lot of situations she's going to get outscaled by, you know, the S tier champions and even a lot of the A tier champions. I think her damage is not there. She does have utility. She does have some interesting builds. You know, she can do AP or hybrid builds. But I just have not been super impressed with Kaisa. I know that, like, a lot of top-level pros enjoy playing her. You do have some interesting outplay potential with the R. So she's playable. You can win with her. But I think for a lot of players, there are going to be better options. Senna, incredibly powerful as a support, but her win rate as an ADC is down right now quite a bit. And I think a lot of it is she just doesn't synergize super well with the attack speed. With the enchanters that are going on out there. She can apply some pressure early, but you're getting gold, but you're not getting the souls. And one of the, not as often, but one of the big things with support Senna is that she can go Umbral Glaive early on, and she gets those souls to scale. So she basically gets free scaling from the souls and really from Umbral and superior vision domination. Versus as ADC, you can go Umbral, but you're going to have a lot less damage. And I meant to mention that about Jhin. I saw Jhin the other night rushing Umbral. I think it's annoying as a support player if you do that, but I think that's not where you want to be in most compositions, because you're giving up a lot of damage if you go Umbral. I mean, Jhin scales so incredibly well off of crit, and Umbral doesn't have any crit on it. And so if he wants to get Infinity Edge, he can't even do that third. So not only does it hurt you as a first item by not giving you a lot of damage, but it's really disabling you from being able to take Infinity Edge as your third item. So I just think it's way too much of a damage hit. I think it is very good on Pyke. I think it is very good on Senna. I know there have been some junglers, like utility junglers, like I think Graves was taking it. So I'm not entirely sure, but the win rate was definitely much, much lower. If we look at Jhin, if he does go Umbral, it's 2% lower. So I guess that's not like insanely lower. And you can still win with it if the rest of your team has a ton of damage, but you're basically really diminishing your ability to hard carry the game if you go Umbral. So yes, you can do that on Senna ADC. I just feel like it's just not going to be as much carry potential. So even though it's the same champion, they function very differently in different roles. She has good utility. She has good itemization as a support, but as an ADC, I just think she lacks a lot of the punching power. And then finally, Samira has been pretty popular. I have seen Samira take over some games. They did nerf her 2 of the items that she likes to get. So, she really, really wants Shield Bow because she's close range. She's going to take some hits. She wants to stay alive so that she can trigger her ultimate. And her ultimate scales incredibly well with healing because I think you get 100% lifesteal off of that ultimate. So she really, really wants that item. Now, she can go Collector second instead of Bloodthirster. So she does have options for the second item, but the first item's still going to be a bit weaker, and it's just hard for her to get a lot of pressure early game. You're not going to have a lot of all-in champions that are meta right now, like Leona and Nautilus are going to have a really hard time. And I think she's just going to get outranged and bullied in the laning phase, and she's just not going to have as much reliable scaling as some of the other champs. Like, yes, she can go off. Yes, she can get, pentakills off her ultimate. If the enemy has a lot of bruisers, a lot of close range champions, melee, maybe she can make that work. But I think it just kind of spaced out standard team fights against tanks and things like that. She's going to have a much harder time than some of these other champs. So she's an okay dive. If you have a hard dive comp, she can get in there and clean everybody up, kind of like Kaisa. But I feel like in a lot of circumstances, it's just a lot more conditional. It's not as much guaranteed power as top tier champs. Okay, and then C and D tier. Now you'll notice in most of my tier lists, I don't have a lot of champs in C and D. I have many more in B, which I consider like B is playable. If you're good on the champ, and especially in certain matchups, they can be all right. A is like good. Play these champs, but S is like, these are the top tier champs. If you can play these, I think these give you the most chance to win, assuming you have a reasonable amount of practice on them to succeed. Okay, but then once we start getting into C tier, these are champs that I would describe as below average. So it's like you can win with them, but I think you're working uphill. I think you need to have an exceptional amount of experience or have a really good read on a matchup. Or a team composition, and a very specific team composition. I just think it's much more conditional, and I just wouldn't do it most of the time. So Ezreal is one that if you've ever watched me on stream over the past 5 years or whatever, you'll know how I feel about Ezreal. He's super skill shot dependent. He can have some bursts. He is very fun to play. I'll say that. I've played Ezreal. He is fun. I understand the appeal of him, but he just takes quite a while to come online. The Essence Reaver plus Muramana build is okay, but I just think that Poke is just not going to be as strong when Enchanters can heal through it most of the time, and he just doesn't have a lot of AoE damage. in team fights. He doesn't have a lot of sustained damage in team fights. He just has poke. So late game, when you're staring down a Kog'Maw and he's just, right clicks you, you might be able to kill him, right? If you hit him with an ult out of a bush and then you WE auto Q him, yes, under the right circumstances, sure, you can blow him up. But there's so many ifs where all Kog'Maw has to do is just right click and kill everybody, right? And then Vayne is a terrible matchup, and she's very popular right now because she has the mobility to dodge most of your skill shots, and you're not getting away. She's going to run you down. So I just think the current matchups are really bad. He's weak in lane. He also doesn't scale super well. He has a ton of skill shots. It's like, you can work some magic if you're just sort of God mode on Ezreal, but I think overall he's going to be underwhelming. Zaya, as much as I hate to say it, because I like Rakan, I think Zaya is a little on the weak side right now. She requires several items to get going. You have to have a lot of practice on her to get the geometry right on those feathers. She can be good if you have a lot of experience on Zaya, and they're running a hard dive comp. They're running like Hecarim, Kaisa, Camille, whatever. If they're just coming at you, she can be pretty good at dealing with that because she goes untargetable with her R. And she can pull those feathers back to do tons of damage to people that are trying to dive you. So it's not that she can't be played. I just think that she just doesn't synergize right now with a lot of the items and champions. I think she's just a little slow out the gate. And the thing that was making her strong, the lethality build, they did nerf that pretty hard. They nerfed her Q really hard. And they've also nerfed Aerie. And just that style of play is a lot weaker as well because you're going to have enchanters that are healing and shielding, and everyone's going to have a lot more HP in general. So I think the lethality style that brought her back into fashion is not great right now. Okay, Ashe, again, kind of a poke champion early on. Is going to be mitigated by a lot of the popular supports. She does have the arrow, which is good. There are increasingly more counters to that, though. People can just dodge. There's a lot of mobility out there. Like Samira can basically wind wall it. Tristana can buffer it. And then, of course, people can take Edge of Night. That is going to be a little bit less common. The supports, if it's an enchanter, they can rush them to Kales. And if they're smart, they probably will. Second item. So, and people are taking Cleanse more often. There's less opportunity cost because Ignite is not as necessary. They nerfed the Grievous Wound effect on it. They nerfed Heal. They nerfed Barrier. So more people are probably going to take Cleanse. So there's just a lot of stuff working against Ashe, and she just doesn't have enough power, I think, late game to carry a lot of games. Now, she does have slows, which are nice, but, again, just not enough power there. The engage can be good, but when you're staring down a Cleanse and an enchanter with a Mikhail's, it's going to be tough to make something happen. And then we've got Draven. Can do a ton of damage early, but again, that's the opposite of what we want to see right now. We want to see scaling. So he can take over. He can completely start, two-shotting people if he gets enough items, but he just really has to get those kills earlier. He's just worthless later. He doesn't have any... He has very, very limited utility. He has the stand aside, which is okay, I guess, at stopping, people from diving you. But he has relatively short range. He doesn't have any sort of AoE abilities. He doesn't have any percentage damage or true damage. Doesn't synergize particularly well with any runes out there right now or items. So he's okay. All that he's got going for him, though, is he gets extra gold on kills. So you need to make that happen. But it's going to be harder to make that happen because you're not going to be seeing as many Nautilus and Leonas and stuff like that in your lanes. Okay. Then we've got Caitlyn. So Caitlyn can pressure early. If you just push the wave, it's going to be hard to kill people in lane, but you can maybe at least put them under tower and get some plates off of them. She's okay late game. She does have the range. She doesn't have any AoE abilities. Like I mentioned before, Hurricane's pretty bad on her because it doesn't stack your headshots like it used to do 5 seasons ago. So no headshot stacking, and sort of similar to Draven, she doesn't have any percentage damage. She doesn't have any true damage. Her attack speed scaling is still pretty low, so she doesn't do particularly well with Zeal items or Lulu buffs. So it's just really not that great. Again, if you hard pressure early, if you have Caitlyn Sona in your lane and you just get all 5 plates, you take the tower, and then you go move mid and you take that tower and you get all those plates before the timer goes down, yeah, you can make it work, but everything just has to go perfectly, I think, with Caitlyn, or you just have to be you know, incredibly talented with managing her combos and things like that. So she's playable, but you're working uphill. And then Sivir, like the lethality build, I think is really what brought her into not prominence, but like made her playable, I guess. It's just kind of the Dark Harvest, Muramana, just push the waves, but she does have some AoE damage. Obviously, if people get hit by the Q or if they're standing too close and they take a lot of bounces, she can do a lot of damage. She does wave clear. She does have the utility of her ultimate to give everyone movement speed, so like the Hecarim's, the Olafs, all of that to run in and dive the backline. So she's okay with like a dive comp, I guess, but you're really sacrificing your ability to hard carry by picking Sivir, and you're just kind of counting on your teammates to do all right. You're just going to farm a bunch and, you know, chip in where you can, but she's just going to get annihilated, I think, by Kog'Maw, Vayne, or something else. And then the final ones, I would stay away from these champions in most circumstances, unless you just really, really love them and you just absolutely want to make them work. Aphelios, you do see him in pro. His win rate is profoundly low. I think he might actually literally be the lowest win rate in the game, at least as far as ADCs go. Traditional ADCs, yes. So, you know, win rate isn't everything, but once you start dipping below that 45, there's something, like, really wrong with that champion when you go down there. And the main problem with Aphelios, it seems like he should scale, like he should do well in this meta, but the issue is, like, you're just working so hard to manage your guns correctly, to communicate with your teammates, and to try to, you know, get them to actually fight when you've got your good guns, when you've got your red, white gun, you know, and you want to be fighting. And just a lot of the items don't scale particularly well with him. They nerfed the interaction with Kraken a while ago. The on-hit with the R plus Kraken. So he has Gale Force. He just takes way too long to come online. He doesn't have any mobility. His damage has just been nerfed tremendously off of his ultimate. So as you can see, once you start to get to 30 minutes, yeah, he can start winning, but he really has to get those 3 items. He really has to get to Infinity Edge, and I think that's just too slow. We are in a slower meta, so scaling is good, but like these champs like Kog'Maw and Vayne, they scale, but they can also really start doing stuff, you know, off of like 2 items. 1 or 2 items. And Kog'Maw's 2 items are like 2,600 each. So anyways, I think he's pretty disappointing. Corki, just don't play this champion bottom. He has like no scaling with attack speed hardly. He does do magic damage, but he's mostly a burst champion, and he's played as a safe counter pick against some things mid lane. I don't exactly know the matchups where he's played, but just don't play him as ADC. Again, I'm not informed enough to know exactly why, but he just doesn't scale as well as a lot of other ADCs in the bot lane. And then Varus did get some buffs. I think it's not enough. He's just kind of split between. He has like okay poke with his Q, which is not meta right now. Lethality is not going to be as good when you can't execute people when they have more health. And then his on-hit damage is really lackluster compared to like Kog'Maw. Like Kog'Maw, you know, is getting like 800 something range, and he's doing 7% of their max health per shot. And then you've got like Varus is rocking like 575 range, and he's doing like 26 damage per shot or something like that. Like, this doesn't make any sense. So Kog'Maw just scales way, way harder, and is a much more effective champion than Varus. Varus does have his ultimate, and that's cool, but I just don't think it's enough to make up for just the raw damage that he's going to be lacking in a lot of situations. And then Zeri is just kind of in the dumpster, I think. Like, maybe you can still win on her, but I don't remember everything they nerfed about her, honestly. It was like 50 different things. So they just nerfed a lot of her interactions, I believe, with her best items. So, interesting champion, but incredibly difficult to balance. And she just had a really toxic build, right? Like, who allows a champion to be able to do Hurricane and Titanic in the same build? That's like survivability plus insane team fighting. Like, a champion like that would just be really OP. You guys can't see my mouse, but Kog'Maw has that right now. So, anyways, okay. But that's going to be it. Thank you all very much for tuning in. Didn't make it in 45 minutes, but we did keep it under an hour. Just wanted to kind of, keep you guys up to date on what's going on. I know I haven't done an ADC tier list in a little while, but there are a ton of changes. So these are my predictions. We'll see how it goes. They have said, I believe, they're watching Vayne. They might nerf Vayne. I know a lot of people were thinking about that. If they do nerf Vayne, I think they'll probably leave Cog, Jinx, and Jhin alone, and I think those will still be really strong. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Be sure to check out the support tier list. I'll link it at the end and at the beginning of this video. And then come by, check out the stream. We'll be trying out some more champions. We played a lot of Sona last night. I thought that was looking pretty good. We might try out some Lulu or some Janna tonight as well. And then, of course, we'll still be playing Rakan whenever we see opportunities for Rakan. And who knows? We might try out some other stuff as well. But anyways, come check it out. 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every night. And I'll see you next time. Have a great day.